today I want to talk to you about a woman who was absolutely desperate. She was willing to do whatever it took to get her story changed, right? Some of you guys are competitive people. I don't know, I saw a little competitiveness up here. You were willing to do what you had to do to stay in your group and to stay in the game. Buzz and Woody were willing to do whatever they had to do to get back to Andy. So today I'd like you to turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 4, verses 24, starting in verse 24. Mark chapter 5, verse 24. We're going to talk today about a woman who really had some issues. She had a lot of problems, she had a lot of issues, and she was absolutely desperate to the point that she was willing to do whatever she had to do to get her story changed. Mark chapter 5, verse 24. Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. Jesus had been going on his way to somebody who, to do some miracles and some incredible things. And a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." This woman had been sick for 12 years. Now, if you're 12 years old in the house today, I want you to stand up real quick. Do we have any 12-year-olds in the house? Really, not a single one? Oh, Emily, she's like, I don't want to stand up. Emily, 12 years old. So your entire life, 12 years is a long time to be sick. You can go ahead and sit down. Thank you, sweetie. 12 years she had dealt with this issue of bleeding, getting no better. In fact, she had been getting worse. She had started to go to all of the doctors to try and fix this issue of bleeding. She had gone through all of her resources, all of the money that she had, desperately trying to find an answer. She was desperate. She was willing to do whatever she had to be healed because she was sick and tired of living with her sickness, her issue. And in fact, to help us understand this story a little bit more and the desperation of this woman, in Bible times, it was Jewish law that if you were sick the way that she was sick, you were considered unclean. And you were considered to be an outcast. You weren't allowed to touch anybody. You weren't allowed to get close to anybody because it was the thought that if you were sick with that, you would spread your germs, and as soon as you touched somebody, then they would become unclean. And so she was an outcast. So for 12 years, she had lived as an outcast. Nobody wanted to touch her. Nobody wanted to get close to her because she was sick. She had a big issue. She had a big problem. Can you imagine going 12 years without a physical touch from another human being? Because what would happen is if you were unclean, if you touched somebody who was unclean, then you had to go through all of these rituals and all of these things to purify yourself and to clean yourself up. This woman was desperate. And she had looked all over for answers. She had suffered a great deal. But she had heard about Jesus. Right? Jesus had been going all over the place, performing miracles, raising people from the dead, healing people, and she thought to herself, if I can just get to Jesus, maybe he could change my story. She had heard these stories of people who encountered Jesus. And so when she heard that Jesus was in town, even though there was going to be a massive crowd of people following him, she was desperate. If I can ask my people who are helping me with my illustration to come forward, please. She was desperate. She was considered unclean. She was an outcast. She had some issues. Can you imagine not just the physical issues of having the sickness, but all of the emotional problems that she probably had because of this, having to live separately from everybody else? Can you imagine the anxiety anytime she went out into public, trying to stay away from everybody because she knew that her issues and her problem would affect somebody else? I'm going to ask you guys to get in a big crowd. We don't want a line, a big crowd. You guys are a big crowd of people. Big crowd, big crowd. Jesus was in town. And she was so desperate to find healing, to find something that could change her story. She had spent all of her money. She had gone through all of the possible options. She had looked all over for answers, and nothing was working. And so when she heard that Jesus was in town, and she saw the crowd of people, she said, I'm sick of living this way. I'm sick of trying to do this on my own. And she was so desperate. She said, I have to get to Jesus. I have to get to Jesus. Please let me through. I have to get to Jesus. And as soon as she touched his robe, the Bible said immediately she was healed. Immediately, the issue that she had dealt with for 12 years, when she touched Jesus, just touched him, immediately her issues were gone. Immediately. She didn't care that she wasn't supposed to be in public. She didn't care that she wasn't supposed to be touching up. She had to get to Jesus. You guys can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you. You see, family, here's the reality of what I want us to talk about today. This woman had issues. She had physical issues. She had a major physical problem. She was sick and she needed healing. She was emotionally broken, and she needed Jesus to come and change her story. All week long, we've talked with our kids, what happens when we encounter God and we say, God, I'm tired of living life on my own. I'm tired of doing it by myself. I have to have you. You see, some of us deal with habits that are hard to break. Some of us deal with addictions. Some of us are dealing with physical sickness. Some of us are dealing with sin. We talked on Monday with our kids. Sin is just a fancy word for mistakes that we make that go against God's word. And it separates us from God. You see, when we have sin in our life, it makes us like an outcast. It separates us from God. But the way that God works is when we come to him And we say, God, I'm tired of living on my own. I'm tired of trying to find the answers on my own. I'm tired of dealing with my physical sickness on my own. I'm tired of dealing with my broken relationships on my own. I can't do anything to fix it. I'm tired of dealing with my habits and my addictions on my own. It doesn't matter how many times I try to stop. I can't stop. God, I'm tired of doing this by myself. We have to get to the point that we are desperate. And we say, God, I'm making a mess of my story. I've made a mess of my life. God, would you come in and change my story? I want to show you guys something, and I probably have it all over me now. You guys, we're going to go ahead and kill the lights because I want to show you something. Kids, it's going to get real dark in here, but it's okay. Can you guys see this? My hands have some yucky stuff on it, right? Now, none of you knew that I had any of this on my hands. I've messed with my hair, and I've got it on my shirt now, and I've really made a mess of myself. But here's what we try to do. We try to take all those things that we think nobody sees, all of the sin, the addictions, the hurt, the pain, the broken relationships, the hopelessness, and we say, no, it's okay, I got this. And we keep searching for answers. We keep trying to do things on our own. We keep saying, you know what, it's okay, we still need a little more time. It's okay, God, I got this on my own. And yet our life continues to be a mess. We continue to have addictions and habits that we can't break on our own, and we keep going back to them. We continue to have sin in our life and allow things into our life that God doesn't want us to have. Things that break God's heart, and it separates us from God. And we keep wondering, God, why is my life not working out the way that I want it to? Why is my life not coming together? I'm sure that's what that woman thought. But when this woman made a choice to run after Jesus, to push through the crowd and say, I have to have Jesus because Jesus is the only one who can change my story. When she made that decision and she said, Jesus, I'm coming after you. Jesus, I'm sorry for the mess that I've made. I'm sorry for the mistakes that I've made. Jesus, I have to have you. Right? Jesus gave her the choice. She's the one that had to come after him. When she went after Jesus, as soon as she encountered Jesus and touched his robe, Jesus immediately changed her story. She was immediately healed. You see, when we come to Jesus, when we say, I'm tired of living life on my own, I'm tired of searching for answers, I'm tired of exhausting all my resources, I'm tired of the broken relationships, I'm tired of all of it. God has something so much more for us. He has a better story for us than what we could ever write on our own. A story that involves his hope, a story that involves his peace, his healing, his wholeness, his freedom. But we have to come to the point and say, God, I don't want to do life on my own. I need you to change my story.